So fellow Toastmasters and welcome guests, an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. A man stood on a railway bridge in northern Alabama, looking down into the swift water 20 feet below. The man's hands were behind his back, the wrist bound with a cord. A rope closely encircled his neck. Some loose boards laid upon the tie supporting the rails. The railway supplied a footing for him and his executioners, 2 private soldiers of the Federal Army, directed by a sergeant and a captain. The company faced the bridge, staring motionless. The captain stood with folded arms, silent, observing the work of his subordinates. In the code of military etiquette, silence is a form of deference. The preparations being complete, the sergeant turned to the captain and saluted. The condemned man and the sergeant were left standing on the 2 ends of the same plank. This plank was being held in place by the weight of the sergeant. At the signal from the captain, the sergeant would step aside, the plank would tilt, the condemned man go down between the 2 ties. The condemned man opened his eyes and saw the water below. If I could free my hands, he thought, I might throw off the noose and spring into the stream. I could evade the bullets and swim vigorously, reach the shore, take to the woods and get home. My home, thank God, is yet outside their lines. As these thoughts were flashed into the doomed man's brain, the captain nodded to the sergeant. The sergeant stepped aside. Peyton Farquhar was a well-to-do planter of an old and highly respected Alabama family. Being a slave owner, he was an original secessionist and ardently devoted to the Southern cause. Circumstances had prevented him from taking service with that gallant army, but meanwhile he did what he could. No service was too humble for him to perform in the aid of the South. One evening, while Farquhar and his wife were sitting on a bench near the entrance to his grounds, a grey-clad soldier rode up to the gate and asked for a drink of water. Mrs. Farquhar was only too happy to serve him. While she was fetching the water, her husband approached the dusty horseman and inquired eagerly for news from the front. "The Yanks are repairing the railroad," said the man, "and are getting ready for another advance. They've reached the Owl Creek Bridge, put it in order and built a stockade on the north bank. The commandant has issued an order, which is posted everywhere, declaring that any civilian caught interfering with the railroad or bridges will be summarily hanged." I saw the order. "How far is the Owl Creek Bridge?" Farquhar asked. "About 30 miles. Is there no force on this side of the creek?" "Only a picket post a mile out on the railroad and a single sentinel at this side of the bridge." "Suppose a civilian, a man, should elude the picket post and perhaps get the better of the sentinel," said Farquhar, smiling. "What could he accomplish?" The soldier reflected. "I was there a month ago," he replied. "There's a great quantity of driftwood lodged against the wooden pier at this end of the bridge. It's now dry and will burn like tinder." The lady now brought the water, which the soldier drank. He thanked her, bowed to her husband and rode away. An hour later, after nightfall, he repassed the plantation, going northward in the direction from which he had come. He was a Federal scout. As Peyton Farquhar fell straight downwards through the bridge, he lost consciousness and was as one already dead. From this state he was awakened by the pain of a sharp pressure on his throat, followed by the sensation of suffocation. Then all at once, with terrible suddenness, the light about him shot upwards with the noise of a loud splash. A frightful roaring was in his ears, and all was cold and dark. The power of thought restored, he knew that the rope had broken and he had fallen into the stream. To be hanged and drowned, he thought, that is not so bad, but I do not wish to be shot. No, not to be shot, that is not fair. His neck ached horribly. His brain was on fire. His heart, which had been fluttering faintly, gave a great leap, trying to force itself out of his mouth. He felt his head emerge. His eyes were blinded by the sunlight. His chest expanded convulsively with a supreme and crowning agony. His lungs engulfed with great draughts of air, which instantly he expelled with a shriek. He had come to the surface, facing down the stream. He saw the bridge fought the soldiers. They shouted, pointing at him. The captain had drawn his pistol, but did not fire. Suddenly he heard a sharp report, and something struck the water smartly within a few inches of his head, spattering his face with spray. He heard a second report, and saw one of the sentinels with his rifle at his shoulder, a light cloud of blue smoke rising from the muzzle. A counter-swirl had caught Farquhar, and turning him half round, the sound of clear, high voice in a monotonous sing-song now rang out behind him. "Company! Attention! Shoulder, arms! Ready, aim, fire!" Farquhar dived as deeply as he could. The water roared in his ears like the voice of Niagara, yet he heard the dull thunder of the volley, and rising again towards the surface, met shiny bits of metal, oscillating slowly downwards. Some of them touched him on the face and hands, then fell away, continuing their descent. As he rose to the surface, gasping for air, he saw that he had been a long time under water. He was further downstream, nearer to safety. The hunted man saw all this over his shoulder. The officer, he reasoned, will not make that error a second time. He has probably already given the command to fire at will. God help me, I cannot dodge them all. An appalling splash within 2 yards of him was followed by a loud rushing sound. A rising sheet of water curved over him, fell down on him, blinded him, strangled him. The cannon had taken a hand in the game. Suddenly he felt himself whirled round and round, spinning like a top. A few moments he was flung upon the gravel at the foot of the left bank of the stream, the southern bank, and behind a projecting point which he concealed to himself from the enemies. He dug his fingers into the sand, threw it over himself in handfuls, and audibly blessed it. All that day he travelled. By nightfall he was fatigued, footsore, famished. Thought of his wife and children urged him on. At last he found the road which led him in, which he knew to be the right direction. Doubtless, despite his suffering, he had fallen asleep while walking, for now he sees another scene. He stands at the gates of his own home. All as he left it, all is bright and beautiful in the morning sunshine. He must have travelled the entire night. As he pushes open the gate and walks past the wide white walk, he sees a flutter of female garments. His wife, looking fresh and cool and sweet, steps down from the veranda to meet him. At the bottom of the steps she stands waiting, with a smile of ineffable joy, an attitude of matchless grace and dignity. Ah, how beautiful she is. He springs forward with extended arms. As he is about to clasp her, he feels a stunning blow to the back of his neck. Blinding white light blazes all about him, with a sound like the shock of a cannon. Then all is darkness and silence. Peyton Farquhar was dead, with a broken neck swinging gently from side to side beneath the